Welcome to Back from the Abyss. I'm Dr. Craig Heacock. This is a place for stories of hope and healing, recovery, and redemption. I want to thank all of you who have decided to help support the out-of-pocket costs of the podcast. I've been calling those of you who give $8 to $10 a month, and it's been such a joy to hear your thoughts and feedback, and also to answer your questions. If you too would like to support Back from the Abyss, click on the Support the Show link in the show notes. Today's story is one of genetic predisposition, environmental triggers, and finally, a psychiatric flamethrower. Whitney's uncle had a particularly severe form of bipolar disorder, and she too began to develop mood instability and depression as an adolescent. When we think of environmental triggers for mania, we tend to think of sleep deprivation, substances, and the postpartum period. And through her 20s and 30s, Whitney began to have more serious bouts of hypomania during times of sleep deprivation or in her postpartum periods. But it took an increasingly severe weed habit to bring her right into the horrors of mania with psychosis. One quick note about Whitney's story. At one point, she describes some misadventures with a sleep med that she calls Nexium. She really meant to say Ambien or Zolpidem. And listeners, watch out for that stuff.
Before high school, my uncle, who was bipolar, had a few kind of scary episodes, and he was a very gregarious, hilarious person. And so before kind of understanding his illness, I really thought he was just so great, but I was really heavily traumatized by him. So there was just so much happening at once. And I remember he and my cousins and aunt moving away abruptly, and it was never spoken about. And so anything that I was experiencing emotionally, I don't know that I even had words for, because it just wasn't a part of our dialogue. My parents didn't sit me down and say, hey, your uncle had this episode because he's bipolar and he's dangerous, so we're not going to speak to them again. It's just, they were gone.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you learned as a kid that you needed to handle stuff yourself.
Yeah.
You needed to figure out how to self-soothe, cope.
Absolutely.
The adults, the people in your life were not going to be there to help you process or support you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not for not wanting to. I think they just also didn't have the resources themselves. And my family was very much hush, hush, we don't talk about mental health. Because if there is a real big problem, it'll be dealt with over here or whatever it is. But we don't need therapy because there's nothing wrong with us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so I kind of just bumped through high school. I had friends and was being recruited for softball. I was a highly recruited softball player. Academically, school was always easy for me. And so I was being recruited by Ivy Leagues and Stanford and Northwestern, and I knew I really wanted to go to the journalism school at Northwestern. And they were recruiting me, which was great, and I went on a recruit trip there, and while I was there, 2 of their players got injured. And they were both pitchers, and I was a shortstop. And so typically in that day, they would, give you your offer on your recruit trip, and you could say, okay, I'm committing or whatever. And they told me, we're going to have to call you when you get home. 2 of our pitchers just went down, and that changes what we need to do for our recruiting class. And so I went home, and at this time, when you were being recruited, you had to tell the other coaches that were recruiting you that you were going to commit. And I thought I was going to commit to Northwestern. So I had already told the other coaches, I'm going to commit to Northwestern, move on to your next athlete. And they called me and they said, so we thought we would have a much higher offer for you, but we can offer you 25%. And at this stage in my life, I'm 16. My high school sweetheart had just broken up with me a few months before, and I am just frozen on the phone. My nervous system is completely shut down, and I've left the building. And my dad gets on the phone, and he says, how dare you mess with my daughter, and then just hangs up. In a lot of ways, when he hung up, it felt like he was hanging up on my dream, because there was, we could have looked at student loans or whatever, but it was just over at that point. And luckily, I was able to kind of scramble, and UCLA had been recruiting me early on in my career. And so I emailed the assistant coach and said, hey, some of my scholarship opportunities fell through. I would love to be a recruited walk-on if you'll have me. And I went on a recruit trip, and that was that. And I went and it ended up at a really great institution and the best softball program in the country, which was pretty cool. But I just, from the breakup happening a few months before to this recruiting journey, I was really traumatized by the time I walked onto the UCLA campus. We had family members that were sick. Like my mother's father was dying. Her best friend was dying of breast cancer. So there was just so much happening at once. So I walked into UCLA just very, very scared. And I think I never really emotionally settled there. And I always felt like I was less than because I was a recruited walk-on. I wasn't like one of their scholarship athletes, even though later on in my career they gave me a scholarship and I earned a starting role. But I just identified with like this less than player. And I think psychologically I was entering depression and not knowing how to get out of that. And even though I didn't have words for that at the time, I didn't have the like conscious knowledge that that's what was happening. I just started to feel really bad in my body and like achy in my joints. And I got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis my freshman year. And I was just a mess psychologically and physically.
Yeah. Wow, that's a terrible diagnosis at any age. But as a D1 athlete, just starting your career to get autoimmune diagnosis like that.
Yeah, it was a major bummer. And to use a less, poetic, it was a bummer. The pills they had me on made me feel so much worse. Like I didn't want to walk to class. I had just enough energy to go to the weight room in the morning and then go to practice. And the rest of the time I would sleep. I think this is definitely when some of my like psychiatric symptoms started to show up because I would have these little bouts of energy and maybe like bouts of mania. And I remember one night I went to the UCLA library and I found a book about inflammation and nutrition. And I read it like in a couple hours, cover to cover. Went to class the next day, went to practice, was totally fine, implemented these changes in my diet, and my symptoms were gone like within a week, which was fantastic, but I was clearly suffering.
Yeah. Were you on steroids then?
So this is not a funny story, but they put me on prednisone over Christmas break and it made me nuts.
Yeah,
and
that can trigger manic symptoms.
Yeah. And it did. And what was interesting was my grandfather on my mother's side, which kind of carries the bipolar disease. My grandfather, when they put him on prednisone a couple of years prior, I saw him have an outrageous manic episode. And so when I was on prednisone, I started to feel it. And I remember sitting in the back of my mom's car on the way home from somewhere, like a couple days after I had started the treatment. I was like, my brain is going insane. I hate this. I was crying and I never really showed emotions around her. I would always save that for my room. Like, I need off of this because it's making me insane. And it really was.
So were you able to finish your softball career and graduate from college and get through all that?
Yeah, I almost quit because I was in so much kind of physical and psychological pain. And I remember meeting with my coach, and she's a tremendous human and still a mentor in my life. And I just told her, like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, this is so incredibly difficult and I'm just emotionally a wreck. And she just said, you're one of the leaders on this team, even if you don't start every day, or even if you're not, one of our scholarship athletes, people look up to you. You have amazing grades, you're kind, you're empathetic, and you're an optimist, and we need you. But I need to know by the end of the summer. We met at the end of the season, end of the school year. And I thought about it, and I called my now husband. He was my boyfriend at the time. And I told him, I don't know if I can do this. And he's like, look, Whit, not very many people get this chance to play a college sport. You're at the best program in the country. I know it's hard. And he's like, I would have given anything to play a college sport. And he said, that's not a reason why you should do it. But I'm just afraid you're going to wake up in 20 years and regret, walking away. And he was right. And I called her the next day. I'm like, I'm in. And I was fully in from that point and able to survive and enjoy it as much as I possibly could there on out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you have any big psychiatric crises in college? It sounds like you were having maybe stirrings of mania, periods of some depression, but did you ever get really racked with either?
Not necessarily. I think my freshman year and into my sophomore year was the most challenging, but I think once I really changed my diet, psychologically, I also got a lot better. And I started dating my husband at the end of my freshman year. So I had this like new love in my life. I did have a weird episode with taking a Nexium, like sleeping pill, that I went insane for, 24 hours. But otherwise, I think I just kind of cruised, and I knew that I was really excited to get into my life after college. Like I knew softball wasn't the end all be all for me. So I had this wonderful man in my life. So I was just excited to like get out and go do that. So other than like the Nexium situation, I was pretty good. Mm-hmm. So after leaving college, I was studying for the LSATs and working at a law firm. And maybe 6 months in, my mom's best friend, her son died. And she had just died almost a year to the day that he passed. And so I decided, fuck this working world in the law school, excuse me, French. And I got an email from team in Italy to go play softball internationally. So I went over there, and that was just incredible. It changed my life. Like just watching the way, I had definitely struggled with disordered eating and kind of body dysmorphia. Seeing these women, it didn't matter what body type they had. They just carried themselves differently. And it really stuck with me. And life is just slower over there and more familial and communal. And so I realized like there's no way and I'm a very, very empathetic person. I can read people's energy so well, to my detriment sometimes. It's difficult for me to be in a crowded room without just absorbing. And so when I was over there, I realized there's no way I'm set out to be a lawyer. I don't know what it takes for that. And I had really gotten into Lululemon when I was at UCLA, and I saw that they were opening some stores in San Diego. And so I applied for a job there and left my law firm job and came home to that. And it kind of launched this like wellness career for me in marketing and just being immersed in different types of movement, whether it was yoga or Pilates or half marathon training or you name it. Like I tried it, and I was doing pretty well for a while. I was just like, I think I definitely, looking back, had like bouts of, I was in the creative industry, like working for Lululemon. I managed all their social media early on back in 2010. So I went to the Winter Games and up in Vancouver, which was amazing. But like I could go all night for a few days, like working on campaigns and working on different things where my teammates were tired and needing rest. And I remember going to Vancouver and like not sleeping, having the time of my life, but just working. Like I was such a good worker.
Yeah. And no realization that being able to work for a few straight days and not sleeping, that might be a problem.
No, not at all. I was losing weight and I had energy. I got really immersed in this creative culture. And part of the problem was, whether it was at Lululemon or I worked for an agency later on, a creative agency, pulling an all-nighter was kind of the norm, especially around campaign deadlines or whatever it was. So I didn't see like anything different. But the culture is also like a very alcoholic culture, and I had to really check myself there. Yeah, I was kind of cruising and had a pretty successful career in marketing. I worked for a couple different wellness brands, and then I had my first child, and I had really been indoctrinated in a culture of like, you go to college to get your MRS degree, like you go find your husband, and then you get married, and then you have the babies, and then you stay home. So I wanted to leave my career and find a way to stay with my son. And I did, and I started doing hitting lessons in the evenings. So I would be with him all day, and then I would teach young girls how to hit for softball. And it was good. I could be with my kid, but I was so lonely and I was so sad. And my husband worked a ton and traveled a lot for work. And so I was just really lonely and for a long time, and also really missing that like creative intelligence that I could use in my marketing career. But yeah, I would say that after having my first son, I started to kind of experience some bouts of depression and sadness, but I would just, muster it to, I'm a new mom. This is lonely. We don't have a village anymore. But yeah, those years were difficult for sure. Right before the pandemic in 2018, 2019, my husband and I were in a really bad place. Like, he was traveling a lot for work and I was home with these two kids, and I was working as well. I actually stopped doing lessons and kind of went back into a marketing career. On the one hand, I was kind of feeling exhilarated again because I was thrown into these creative campaigns and launching websites, and I would stay up all night and I would build everything myself and I wouldn't let anyone else help me. And definitely experiencing mania. I would,
but not realizing it.
Not having a name for it. Just thinking I was like, there was something incredibly wrong in my marriage. So I would walk at night and smoke weed. I would roll joints and walk the neighborhood to kind of, again, kind of going back to that, my early stages of life. Like, you just deal with this by yourself. You go. And so I would walk around the neighborhood.
Was there, you think, a correlation or causation when you think of the, again, emerging manic symptoms and starting to smoke a lot of weed?
I think for sure. I mean, definitely later on, like a few years later, when I really was a heavy cannabis user, and my husband would say this too, that he would definitely see the more cannabis I used, the more mania symptoms he would notice. Early on, it was just at night, after everyone was asleep. And then after the pandemic, I was a very dependent, like all day cannabis user. And I really saw it as like my medicine.
Yeah. What was it treating?
Anxiety.
Yeah. Or boredom, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have the words for that or the kind of conscious knowledge of that. But one of the things I've worked on in my own therapy, I started seeing a somatic therapist maybe back in 2019 to help with my anxiety. Because whenever I'm in a social situation, I have these like internal fluttery, and it takes me, it's really difficult for me to connect. And so I've been working for years to kind of regulate my nervous system. I've probably never really had a regulated nervous system as much as I can enjoy it now. I'm so thankful for that. But yeah, I was experiencing a lot of anxiety, and it also was treating just being able to disassociate and be out of my body and not have to pick up on other people's emotions or internalize them. That was being able to leave my body was wonderful. Mm-hmm. And it served me for a long time, and, until it didn't. Mm-hmm. So I kind of started this therapy journey. My husband and I started going to therapy, and things got much better. And we actually got pregnant with our third child. I had her in August of 2020, so right in the smack, which was a very interesting time to be pregnant. But I had her at home with a midwife, which was the most beautiful experience. And after she was born, I was like right back in to cannabis. And I had a friend who made tinctures, so I would just put it in my coffee every day. And a friend and I actually decided to start a magazine about like movement and somatic awareness. And I'm so proud of what we created. It's so beautiful, but I was so unwell. I was so manic, and
nobody saw it. Like,
I think
husband or other friends or family.
I think my husband probably did, but didn't really know like what to. I don't know. Maybe he wanted not to see it, or maybe he just thought I was kind of getting high too much. And he also, I think, he's a wonderful human, and I think he wanted me to have my creation and to have this moment in my career, since I had really supported his for so long and whatever he needed to do and help him travel, do whatever he needed. I think he saw this as his opportunity to give that to me. And I'm sure he saw it, but maybe didn't know what to make of it. And I think I was also really good at kind of hiding the manic symptoms, because I think I was subconsciously trying to deny that I too could, be experiencing what my uncle experienced, or because that was really scary for me.
I was just wondering that, this knowing that your uncle had something serious, and that maybe seeing a little of yourself in that would be maybe too much to
there was
contemplate.
Definitely, I don't know if ego is the right word, but something was blinding me from recognizing that I had these bouts of depression previously in my life. I had these momentary spurts of energy that would not make me tired. And I think I could just chalk everything up to, my relationship with my husband is difficult, so I'm feeling a normal amount of sadness. And having a uncle who was really, on the one hand, wonderful, and on the other hand, terrifying for me and very traumatizing to me, there's no way I could be that, because I don't want to be that for my kids. So something within me blocked that fully. I have a really dear friend who's, when I had my first real manic episode, not first real, but first, this is now apparent to everyone but me.
First truly chaotic, out of control manic episode. Yeah.
She had moved back to Tennessee. She left her partner and father of her children back in 2020, but she and her kids actually lived with my husband and I for about 6 months as she was transitioning. And she's she really is like a twin flame. Psychically, we have this wildly deep connection. So she flew back from Tennessee to kind of intervene with me. And I wasn't understanding what she was trying to say, because she told me you need to be in an inpatient care facility immediately, and you need to stop smoking weed, and you need to do all these things. And I thought my ego, or whatever it was that was protecting me from seeing myself fully, heard her as saying, you have a drug problem and you have to remedy that. And so I did, I stopped smoking weed, but I wasn't ready to be institutionalized or go check myself in somewhere. My husband had already had asked for a separation. So I was just kind of
was that related to some of your behaviors, or was that separate?
What, her coming out?
No, your husband asking for a separation, was that?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was pretty unreachable in a lot of ways, and really lost in creating this magazine and creating community. And I mean, the signs should have really been there, because I like to say I'm kind of an outgoing introvert, but even, my friends now are if I go out with, the Little League moms, they'd be like, what are you doing here? Or if I go out to a team dinner, they're surprised to see me, because I love being home. But
what do you think you were doing and saying that finally alerted your friend, your husband, that finally made people see, okay, something's seriously up?
I was convinced that I was going to throw a music festival, and I was driving to LA. And this is the gift of, if you want to call it the gift of being bipolar. When you're in a manic episode, there is nothing out of reach. You can do anything. And I really was making all these connections. I started an email address with the festival that I wanted to create. I met a friend of mine who owns a festival property, an hour from San Diego. So I was going to make this happen. And my husband had just asked for a separation 2 weeks before. And I was going up and back to LA constantly and leaving my kids with my husband. And so I think that behavior, and basically,
which was so unlike you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And
totally out of character.
Meeting friends and wanting to throw a festival. I was just spiritually bypassing the really sad, devastating fact that my husband wanted out. And I was just elated. And I think that was one of the kind of triggering points for my friend when she got on a plane to come see me. Because when I told her, like, it's over, he said he can't do this anymore. I was really happy and joyous when I spoke to her. And so I think that was all. She knew something was up for sure. And yeah, I think that behavior of just like going to meet people and staying at these hotels and racking up credit card debt, and I was buying Bitcoin, and I was doing all those like the classic kind of bipolar, like endless resources that are actually not endless.
And when you quit smoking cannabis, did the symptoms abate, or how did the mania play out after that?
Yeah, I would say it definitely leveled out over a couple weeks of not smoking cannabis. And I was sober for at least probably 6 or 8 months, but I was still like trying to figure out how I can live in an apartment by myself, and still trying to figure out how I could kind of do this festival or whatever. I still wanted to do that, but I had none of the energy that I had previously for it. And then that's when reality really set in. I kind of stabilized, and I was finally sad and finally like, oh, my marriage is ending, and there's no part of me that wants it to end. And my husband and I were able to reconcile, which was great. Then maybe a year later, my daughter had, so this is 2024 maybe, a few weeks before Christmas, my daughter pulled a fish tank. She was like sitting underneath. We had this coffee, kind of like this coffee table underneath our TV, and the heater, like the vent is right underneath this. So the kids would sit under this, and they would pull the drawers out to like, so they could have their head fully. And she pulled the drawer down to stand up, and there was a fish tank on that just smashed over her head. Like it went right behind her and kind of smashed next to her. And she was fine. I was like picking shattered pieces of glass out of her hair and sand, and it spun me out. And at this point, I had been smoking cannabis not as regularly. Like maybe I was sober for about 6 months, and then I was like, oh, I can dabble. I hadn't made the connection yet of like what it was doing to me. So I went from smoking maybe like 3 or 4 joints a day to like 1 a week. And it spun me out, and I started getting really, really, really anxious. So I smoked a couple of joints like in one day. And then here we are on Christmas Eve, and I'm smoking a few joints a day. And I had a cannabis drink at my brother's house, and there was just family dynamics, like arguments that were really icky, and one person who was really, really, really drunk, and it was awful. And so I would just down that cannabis drink, and suddenly we're back at the house, and it's 1 a.m. on Christmas morning, and I am wide awake, and I'm realizing I had already started to feel manic in that week, and I realized fully, I dropped to my knees. I'm like, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, please. I have a big thing with Mary Magdalene. Please tell me what's wrong with me. And I just got this download of like, you are bipolar and you have this, this family history, and you have to stop smoking weed forever, and you need to really seek help.
Wow. That's quite a download.
Yeah.
And did you hear it? Did you believe it?
I did. Yeah. I absolutely, I stopped. That was the last time I smoked weed, was in Christmas 2024. No alcohol, no cannabis since that moment. So that happened, and I was already kind of manic. For some reason, I didn't tell my therapist right away, like, hey, I think I'm bipolar. I think the mania was really starting, and there was these fires in LA, and I could smell them in San Diego. And I grew up in East County, San Diego, and we would have fires all the time as a kid, and we'd have to like hose down, the area of our house. And so I was kind of like scared because there were so many times in my life where I had to like pack up or prepare to leave. And so the fires did something to me too, where I like stayed up all night and was experiencing this mania, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And it took on kind of
Was it scary?
Yeah, it was definitely, it almost felt more destructive because it was like, burn your life down, like absolutely burn your life down right now. And even though I was sober, I wasn't getting better. And I started.
That's actually such a good description, eloquent description of what mania does. Like when mania is really raging, it burns your life down.
Yeah.
It takes everything down.
It really does. And, my best friend who I don't speak to anymore because of this and her own boundaries, which I totally respect, and other people that, were definitely harmed in my wake or just afraid that like I'm gonna, show up and be manic, or I don't even know necessarily what. But yeah, it's very destructive, and for me personally, I don't know if this is the case for everyone, like you really attack the people around you that see you the most clearly. So I tend to attack my husband.
Attack, you mean like verbally, emotionally?
Yeah. And just like make up things about him that aren't true. Or like I was convinced that when I was in, a lot of things were happening at this time. Like I thought the cartel was following me. And people would say things to me or I would pick up a conversation that people were having, and I thought it was like a code. And so I thought my husband had been cheating on me for years. I believed that he had other kids that were in our little league that happened to be on our team. Like that's how dark it got.
Yeah.
And
was this the first time that you actually got delusional?
Yeah.
Like this episode where you started believing things that weren't true.
Totally.
You're getting paranoid. You're getting special signs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought people were having secret conversations with me, and they weren't. They were just having dialogue. But yeah, I was just like, I remember texting my husband at my son's Little League game and saying like, oh, so that kid's yours too, huh? Like I won't mention his name, but he looks a lot like you, and stuff like that. And I remember so much of it, which is kind of a bummer, but also it's kind of a gift because I can fully, like, I never want to go back there. And I can't guarantee anyone that I won't have another episode, but I can promise the people that I love that like, I will do everything in my power to accept treatment and accept different medication or whatever I could possibly need. Yeah, it was definitely scary to be inside of my brain. My therapist suggested that I go to like a inpatient therapy or like a halfway kind of inpatient where I could go during the day and not stay at night. And one of my dear friends convinced me to go to kind of an inpatient kind of residential thing up in Newport. And I left, I remember it was a few days before Valentine's Day. And so I remember like going to Target and like getting the kids like Valentine's and, cause they're little, but they're not like, they're not so little that they're not going to remember. Like my oldest is 12, my middle is 10, and my youngest is now 5. And so they were, not super young when this was happening. And so I got them Valentine's, and it was the longest I had never been away from them more than like a day or two. So it was devastating, but it also saved me. It stabilized me. I was medicated immediately. I was diagnosed. There's a lot of things I would do differently at this care facility, but I will say that it changed everything. Like just having the diagnosis.
So how did they get you to agree to go to treatment? Because this is something I see a lot where people are in for example, like a manic delusional episode, and I, under the family, say, okay, you need to get treatment, and the person doesn't necessarily see it, or they're too scared. I mean, how did they actually get you to go?
I was afraid I was going to lose my kids, because especially going through potentially a divorce, one of our friends called CPS on me. Like my behavior had become, erratic and kind of scary enough. And I actually read the transcript, so I figured out who it was. But I actually really thank her for that, because when CPS comes to your house, it's a whole like you, as a mother, like I'll do anything to not just have my kids. Cause I don't selfishly I don't want to be unwell and they be in my care. Like I want to be well. And so I think that was probably what pushed me over the edge.
Because it is one thing to think that you could be losing your husband or your best friend, but to think that the state, Child Protective Services might be coming for your kids because you're so unable to parent them. That is a brutal wake-up call.
It was brutal. I really do believe you have to do life and well-being for yourself. Like you have to first and foremost take care of yourself because you love yourself and want to be well. But those babies they're so precious and I'm so grateful for them. And I think, having CPS show up to my house and the mania wasn't quite as bad as at this moment. Like I was still definitely in an episode, but I had leveled off enough to have some awareness of like things are not great and I need to check off these boxes and, tell CPS that I'm doing the right thing and taking care of myself. And if I need to be medicated or diagnosed, then that's what I'll do. Like I think that was definitely the trigger for me was my babies.
Yeah. When you got to treatment, they started you on medication. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tell me about that.
I don't remember the exact meds I was on, but I know I was on a couple antipsychotics, lithium, and like gabapentin. And some of them just made me feel like really like so heavy and tired. And I was really nervous I don't remember the dosage, but it was like my psychiatrist wanted to put me on like, I'm making this up. You could tell me better if this is potentially right. But he's like, I need to put you on like 1,600 milligrams of lithium right now. And in my head, I was like, all I think of is like mushroom milligrams. And like, cause that's the only like medicine I know. And so I'm like, oh my God, if you put me on that many drugs, I'm going to be running up and down the streets naked. My friend who got me into the treatment center, she's the type of person that's like a mayor. Like she makes friends with everybody. And she became friends with this psychiatrist and he had her on call. So I think they were both working me. Like she would call me and be like, hey, you have to just take this. Like you got to trust him. And I had some like medical injuries in my life. So it's difficult for me to be prescribed medication and not be fearful. But I definitely stabilized really quickly and I had lost a significant amount of weight and I finally was sleeping and eating well. And I gained, 6 or 7 pounds in the first like week of being there. And so just having that progress and I think just coming back to like, I just wanted to get home to my kids. So I would literally do anything this man asked me to do. Yeah.
Did you have a discussion in the hospital about whether you were going to need to be on something like lithium long-term? Because I'm just wondering, hearing your story, I could imagine if I were the inpatient doc wondering to myself, like if you stayed away from weed, would that be enough? And I guess I'm thinking like you'd already had some stirrings of this back in college. So, clearly you had, I think, a bipolar kind of genetic predisposition. So I think one of the tricky things in this case is, do you need to be on some kind of long-term mood stabilizer or is it enough to just not do substances?
I think the state I was in, the residence that I went to was like kind of like a triage, but they wanted me to be there for like a whole month. And I was like, no, absolutely not. Like I'm getting out of here. He said like, you're definitely bipolar and you are definitely need to like be on this. I don't know how long, but you cannot leave without having a psychiatrist at home. Like you're going to get, 16 days of my prescription, but like you have to like like, you have to check in with me and you have to do this. Like, he's like, I don't want to call CPS, but if you don't, like, he kind of, and he was actually very, very kind. Initially, it was just kind of like med management. And then like we kind of built a nice rapport. But with my psychiatrist now, who I've been with since then, we talk about getting off of lithium entirely.
Because that's all you're taking now.
That's
just
all
lithium.
I'm taking now. Yeah, I have 450 milligrams of lithium kind of in an extended release. So I think we will probably in this like year, now that I've like stabilized and feel really good. I feel really good that I have a team of people between my psychiatrist and my therapist. And then my therapist has a few people, like I've signed letters and documents that she can reach out to if I'm, looking manic or whatever it is. So yeah, long answer. Yes, I believe I can probably not have to be on it forever, but who knows?
Yeah. What's your intuition? What's your gut sense? If you had never come across THC cannabis, do you think you would have still gone into full-blown mania at some point? I mean, do you have a sense of that?
It definitely was gasoline. I think I still had the match. I don't know.
I think that's
Maybe,
actually a
maybe
perfect
not.
description, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. The match meaning that you almost surely have the genetic predisposition. Like it, again, this goes way back, the stirrings of this, but for it to really flame out of control, it needed some kind of accelerant.
Yeah. And I've had some pretty deep experiences with psilocybin and wachuma. And I think that those experiences, while spiritually absolutely incredible, were also destabilizing and also like a little bit of gasoline on what I was experiencing. It's enough that like, I live in San Diego and Ocean Beach, where like it's a weed town. Like you walk down the cliffs and like you smell a joint, or you just smell it. And so like it's actually kind of nice for me because I can be like, oh, that's nice. How are you guys? How are you all? But what it triggered in me, like I definitely have a like bodily knowing of like, absolutely not, like that. I can't ever do that. And I won't do that until my 70th birthday. Someone's rolling me a blunt and I'm doing one blunt and then I'll get sober again. But that's the deal I've made with myself. If God willing, I make it to 70, someone's rolling me a blunt.
I actually know a bunch of people who have said the exact same kind of thing.
How funny.
This substance or substances have caused me great problems, but once I get to some advanced age, F it, I'm going to
I just want the one blunt. I'm not going to do a daily use. I just want on my 70th birthday party, just the one blunt. And then, so we got 30 years, but I know enough that cannabis is so dangerous for me. And I think early on, because I really started smoking weed when I was maybe 19. And yeah, that's probably when a lot of these psychologic issues started, like the depression. So yeah, maybe it's a pretty big gasoline can for me. Yeah.
I mean, I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but I have a whole bunch of patients who never could really stabilize despite all our best efforts until they finally left cannabis behind. Like that was the one destabilizing thing that just could, until that was off the table. There's nothing we could do to really stabilize them.
Yeah. Which is a nice deterrent in sobriety, when you know that you can have an episode, it makes it pretty easy to, like, I don't have the same relationship with alcohol that I do cannabis. I still want to be sober because I don't want to be psychologically unwell, but cannabis is so sticky. And yeah, it's wild. And I think, I know you talk about it a lot, but it's just not out there it's not a known thing, like how this can really trigger outside of, concentric circles. Like I think people need to know what cannabis is capable of creating in someone's mind.
I wonder if we might wrap up with, I think just a simple question, like, why did you reach out to me? Why did you want to come out here to tell your story?
I think for me, storytelling is just pure medicine. And having the bipolar diagnosis, and like, I didn't die. When someone told me that, I was mad. Definitely. I was like, forget it. This is not, but if I could rewind and go back, to maybe 3 or 4 years ago and like really clearly look myself in the mirror and be like, well, baby girl, you are bipolar. It's okay. There's great medication for it. Your cannabis is not serving you. It's actually making it a lot worse. And I will say that I'm a very good mother, and I have been for most of my kids' life, but there's portions where I wasn't because of my disease, my illness, and because of cannabis. And there's nothing I can do to get those years back. But if I can inspire even just one person to not be afraid of their diagnosis or a potential diagnosis, or if they're dabbling with, hey, I need to be sober for a while, always a good idea. And that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Like, my husband and I have repaired so much, and I treated that man awfully. And there's, friends that I've lost along this journey that I don't know that I'll ever have again. But the way I show up in my life now as grounded and whole and also present and not disassociated and not trying to escape my body is so precious. And I don't want to go through any of that again, but I do. I would, to have the relationship I have now with my husband, my kids, my mom and dad, my brother, and 2 of my closest friends. Like, that's worth all of it. So I think that's why I think if you can hear my story and know, like, you're going to survive, but you have to face it, and you have to be okay with not being okay, and that there's amazing medication out there. And there's also people that really want to help, and not everyone is going to turn their back on you. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you reached out to me, and that you came all the way here.
Yeah.
Flew out to Colorado. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure.
This story is going to touch a lot of people.
Thank you for doing these stories. We all need them.
Yeah, you're welcome. When I'm coaching my patients with bipolar disorder about how to stay stable and minimize their meds, I always talk about keeping a sleep schedule with the same wake-up time daily, as sleep deprivation catalyzes mania. And I'm also very vigilant with my patients in the postpartum period, as this also is a high-risk mania time. But over the last 10 years or so, I've come to realize that the most common mania and psychosis trigger by far is THC. And for so many of my patients with mood and psychotic disorders, the difference between stability and chaos is THC. And this is not an easy sell in a state where we literally have quote-unquote medical cannabis dispensaries everywhere. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I'll be doing a solo episode on working with countertransference. Thank you for listening.